Welcome to the Men of Character Conference.
Let's jump right in. There is a ton of noise in the modern world. We all have obligations, people we encounter, the ads we encounter online and on the television, the number of choices we have in the supermarket, our smartphone dinging at us. Suffice to say that most people are not very good at navigating all this noise. In my experience, people typically go about it in one of two ways. Either they escape online and spend tons of time scrolling Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and other social media sites comparing themselves to others, or they find a monotonous routine that they go through each and every day where it ends collapsing on their couch and watching 2 episodes of something on Netflix and then going to bed and starting all over again. They live for the weekend, and that's not something that I think you should strive for. And I'll preface this. When you're single or when you're married without kids, it's not necessarily easier to navigate all this noise, but there is certainly more time. So for the single guys listening to this, the amount of time and the freedom that you have to level up your life is virtually infinite. So listen to the other guys speaking at this conference. Level up your fitness, level up your health, dial in your personal fitness and your style. This is a time which you should absolutely take advantage of the freedom and the time that you have to get your life on track. And I know personally I sometimes took that for granted, and that's regrettable to me looking back, because once you have kids, there are a lot of additional responsibilities that consume a ton of your time. So you can either use that as an excuse, or you can use it as a reason to keep leveling up your life, which is what I want to talk about today. Leveling up your life, the family edition. Your kids watch everything you do, and so it is imperative that you, as the man, as the leader of your household, get your life leveled up and dialed in such a way that your wife can be proud and your kid has a role model worth following. So what I always tell people is that, you don't have to go to a library and sift through thousands of books anymore. The internet is a magical thing if used correctly. And there's an abundance of research on what makes people successful and happy. And there's even studies that tracked people to the end of their life, and there's these people that are 88, 90, 95 years old, and they will tell you, these are the things we wish we would have done differently. These are the things that made us happy. These are the things that made us unhappy. And I think you'd be doing yourself a favor to look up some of those things and discover what those are. And so that's exactly what my wife and I did to level up our lives and to be a good role model for our son. And so we looked at this research, and think about it like a Venn diagram, okay? You and your family have your values, and there are these things that are inherently true. And those are things like vitamin D, sunlight is good for us. Being hydrated is good for us. Sleep is paramount to success. I have a document on my computer called Hacking Life that goes through a lot of these things, and it's really easy for me to refer to, but it's, your personal relationships, the relationships you have with yourself, first and foremost, with your family, with your friends, as a father. These are things you need to think about. Your physical health, your sleep, your water. Do you lift weights? What's your cardio look like? Your nutrition. All these are things that you need to get dialed in, but there is an ample amount of research on to show you what that looks like. Personal finance, mental and emotional wellness. What makes you mentally and emotionally strong? Is it taking the time to read? Is it taking the time to write? Is it getting the correct mental models for optimizing for good decisions? Is it creating systems and habits that you trust, that you can rely on a consistent basis to live your best life? Okay, these are all things that you need to research and think about, and then you need to combine those with your values in a Venn diagram, and what comes out in the middle is your North Star. It's the things that guide your life and help you in a busy, noisy world more quickly and more effectively make decisions that will help you level up your life. And the way in which my wife and I did that is we created this Venn diagram, and we have these things in between, and we said, now what are ways that we can stay focused on these goals? And so we created the Stevens Family Commandments. So not unlike the 10 Commandments, there's 10 of them. Unlike the 10 Commandments, we think about them as fluid. And, as our kids get older and we think about the way in which we navigate this world with them, they will have the ability to chime in on these and make suggestions and recommendations based on the things we want to achieve as a family. Okay? And so I'll briefly go through each of those and talk about them and why we chose them, but I would encourage you to spend some time seeing what's important to you and overlaying your values with things that make people successful and happy, and come up with something that works for you, whether it's a 10 Commandments document or something else. So my wife and I, our 10 Commandments are: be kind, treat others the way you want to be treated. Okay? That's an easy one. I borrowed a phrase from Hunter Drew, another speaker, to respect and protect. And I think that's really important, to positively impact other people. Another 10 Commandment is that family comes first. Okay? There are a lot of things, again, a lot of noise that influences the decision we make, but most importantly, the highest ROI that we get as parents is, will our kid become a positive contributor to society and the things and the decisions that we make as a family? So be kind, family comes first. Next is think healthy, fit family. I think about what Alexander Juan Antonio Cortez. Did I do that right? Alexander Juan Antonio Cortez. He probably doesn't do it like that at all. So forgive me, Alexander. But he says the stronger you are, the harder you are to kill. And so I think about that a lot. And my wife, true story, on her bachelorette party, she got up before everybody else to run and do crunches and sit-ups. And it wasn't just because she was going to be a bride, it's because that's the type of person that she is. And so that's the kind of things that we want to still instill into our son. In fact, we both broke our personal records at the 10K distance and the half marathon distance last year in our early 30s, which is, not something a lot of people can say. So we're proud of that. But those things are not just vanity metrics. They are things that will help us live a long, strong life. The next one is less things, more time, more experiences. I think people get caught up in consumerism, and I always tell people you shouldn't be guilty that you make money. You should feel guilty about the way in which you spend it. And so we try to save for a future, but we also try to spend money on experiences that bring us closer together as a family, or enable us to see and do things that we're grateful for, versus filling our house with things that we don't need. We think that's pretty important. So be kind, family comes first, think healthy, fit fam, less things, more time, more experiences. And number 5 is an abundance mentality. We focus on the things that we can have, not what we can't. We focus on the things that we do have, not what we don't. And we focus on what we've accomplished, not what we didn't. I just think it's very critical that you maintain your frame and you focus on the things that you can control in life. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't set ambitious goals. It just means that you shouldn't get discouraged if you don't achieve something that you want to achieve. You should be grateful for what you have and then keep working and clawing towards getting what you want. The next one is to opt outside. Nature soothes the soul. There's a lot of research to support this, but we know for us and for our kid, we love being outside. We love getting sunlight on our skin. We like running. We like playing. We like jumping. Those are things that help us live our best life. So there's 6. The next one is reframe the bad. Find the silver lining. A lot of people come home and they complain all the time. My boss is an asshole. Okay? Whether or not that's true or not, it doesn't matter. You can't change that. So you can come home and whine that your boss is an asshole, or you can say that because my boss is an asshole, it gives me the ability to learn patience or how to navigate difficult people or whatever. And we think that's really critical. The best resource for this for me is David Foster Wallace's talk, This is Water. So I would encourage you to check that out. The next one is be anti-fragile. Embrace chaos, learn and grow stronger. Part of the reason I have a side hustle is because if I got laid off or if something happened to my day job, I don't want that to negatively impact my family in a big way. I want to be able to, sustain us while I find a new job. And so we think about that in all the ways in which we navigate life. How can we, prepare ourselves for chaos, learn as a result of the chaos, and grow stronger, not only as an individual person, because as individuals, we're not anti-fragile. We can aspire to be, but we're not. But as a family unit, you know, we're trying to get closer to that. And so that's what we aim for. So that was number 8. Number 9 is always do your best at what you choose to do. And I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. And the last one is create Polaroid moments. This is another one I borrowed from Hunter Drew. So again, please check out his talk. He is an authentic man who is a leader of men, who is a leader of his family, and just a phenomenal resource. But create Polaroid moments. And I love that because it constantly reminds us, do not succumb to the monotony. That is not a solution to the noise. The solution is to step outside the monotony, to create moments that are memorable, that we're grateful for, that we're happy about, that show who we are as a family. And then we always tell ourselves each day is a new opportunity to practice our commandments, because there are days that we struggle, there are days that we face challenges, and there are days where we just, it's not all in sync. And so every day is a new day to start over. And we think about that a lot. And like I said, we think about these commandments as fluid things. They can change if something, comes into our life, or we decide that these don't make us happy or don't make us more robust as a family. Then at that point we would look at those, we would reevaluate them, we would get rid of one, we would add another one. But I think the important thing to take away from this talk is that just because you have a family, just because you have kids, just because you have a lot of new opportunities, or new obligations rather, does not give you an excuse to just go through the motions. It does not give you an excuse to, settle down and not keep trying to achieve your goals and your dreams as a father and as a man, and helping your family achieve the dreams that they have as well. And so really, that's my takeaway, is just because you no longer have the amount of time and the freedom that you used to have does not mean that there is an excuse to not level up your life. So, like I said, thank you so much for listening to this talk. Thank you to Bill for having me. There's countless other men on here they're probably much more equipped than I am to offer you individual specific niche advice, but I just felt like this was a place where I could add some real value. And I hope that you did get value out of it. And I hope that you will take a moment to think about things that, inherently are proven to make you more successful and more happy as a person, and combine that with your own values to create a value system and a North Star where you wake up every morning and you know that you have something to rely on to go achieve your goals and your dreams. Thank you all.
Today I have the pleasure of including Ryan Stevens, who's a business strategist, a husband, a father, and the owner of Dialed In Men. So definitely check him out on Twitter and on his website, dialedinmen.com. Today he'll be speaking about leveling up your life, family edition. So very important for fathers out there to hear Ryan's message. He's someone I look to as a great example of what it is to be a working father out there who's getting it done in all aspects. So thank you, Ryan, for agreeing to be on the conference and for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Bill. I appreciate it. And I'm glad that it looks like I'm getting it done, because sometimes it certainly feels like you're juggling a lot of balls, right? So I think, some days you're on point and other days you're doing the best you can.
That's right. Yep. So why did you feel like this topic was something that you wanted to touch on, around being a father, around your family?
Yeah. So, I was a single man for a long time. And even after my wife and I got married, we waited a little bit to have kids. And so I just felt like my life was so optimized prior to kids. Like everything was so dialed in. My fitness was on point. I read a lot, I wrote a lot, I thought a lot. You have this infinite amount of time when you're single. And, when we had our first kid, it was the greatest thing in my life and the greatest moment of my life. But at the same time, it's like a huge adjustment, right? Because you lose a lot of time that you're devoted now to this kid, where it's like, when do I have time to work out? When do I have time to do all these things I used to do? And so it's really important there's plenty of guys in the Men of Character Conference that are going to tell people how to level up their style and their personal finance and their fitness, and guys that'll do it better than me, and I think where guys like Hunter Drew and I have a different perspective is how do you do these things while navigating, having a family?
Nice. So what is your approach then? So how did you, you were single, then you went, you got married, you had a kid. How do you keep yourself dialed in as your website says now?
Yeah. So the way that we thought about this, and I sat down with my wife and we talked about how do we still do the things and accomplish the things we want to accomplish in life, with a kid in tow and with another one coming. You can see the crib in the background back here. We got another one due in late October, early November. So
nice.
We're excited for that, but we also are mindful of the time it takes to be a successful parent. And so we sat down and we said, what is important to us, our values and our ethics. And then we kind of overlaid that, think about a Venn diagram there's this huge body of research out there now that we don't have to go to a library and sift through to understand what generally makes people successful and happy in life, right? Get some sunlight, get some vitamin D. I hear Alexander's head in my voice all the time. The stronger you are, the harder you are to kill. So how do we find time to keep lifting? All these things. And so we kind of overlaid our values with these things that we know make you happy and successful in life. And as a result of that, we built the Stevens Family Commandments. And it's basically 10 commandments by design that we think about it as a way, it's our North Star. And, what we think about a lot of times is you're optimizing all these different things at once. But if you have a North Star that you can look to, it can help you make the right decisions, in the right amount of time to live a successful life.
Nice. So I feel like there's a pattern that I'm seeing among the fathers that I've included on the conference of, like Jake Weigel I spoke to 2 days ago, and he does like a situation bowl where once a year right before school starts, which I feel like this was a fantastic idea. It's like different situations that the kids might encounter. And then I hear you talking about, he's actually going to share his list as part of the extras to the conference. So I'm excited personally to get my hands on that. But then I hear you talking about like you've got, you and your wife sat down and talked about these things, and now you've got commandments around it. It seems like it's pretty important to have a wife who's on board, right? Who's willing, and you have to also be as a father willing to like communicate and say like, hey, we've got to plan these things out versus letting life just sort of come at you and being reactive to it. Seems like the proper approach is some planning, even though, you can't predict everything that's going to occur. You're at least you're prepared for what could occur, and you've got some idea of like how you're going to react. So is that something that you think about as a father and as a family?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that proactiveness is so critical. And a gentleman on Twitter that I admire a lot, Samuel Hirschberger, said the other day, he said, "What's your biggest fear?" And he said, "Knowing that I'm going to die one day and not knowing what day that is." And so I think about that a lot too, that like, how can we optimize every day? And I just think there's so much noise in the world right now. And I think people, the average person deviates down two paths. Either one, they spend so much time, scrolling Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and comparing themselves to other people. Not only that, comparing their normal life to other people's best lives that they're, showcasing on social. Or, the other thing that people do is they just go down this path of falling into these monotonous tasks every day where it's like, get up, get our kids up, scramble together breakfast and lunches, get out the door, drop a kid off, commute to work, sit at the desk all day, probably spend too much time on social during the day job, go home, scramble for dinner, get the kid to bed, and then just collapse into the couch and watch Netflix for 2 hours and start all over again. And that's not what I wanted, to happen with our lives. I didn't want to wake up 5 years from now and say, what have you done? Well, I've watched these 7 series. No, there's things that we want to accomplish, like launching Dialed In Men was one of those things. And so our commandments enable us to have something that we can refer back to ensure that we're living, our best life.
Nice. And you've got a full-time job, and you were just telling me that the research that you've raised money for and a lot of really important stuff. Just, I think a lot of men, that are successful have that work part. But it seems like you're trying to make sure that all aspects of your life, right? I feel like a lot of even successful, let's say, men in their careers, they end up ruining their marriages, then they lose their kids. And I feel terrible for them, but you have to sort of spin all those plates and make sure that everything is taken care of. And that's our job, right? And that's just the world that we live in. So how do you manage that? How do you manage having a job where, you've got an important position, you're doing a lot of, you're busy, you've got meetings, how do you balance out being great at your career, also being, you built your personal brand online, plus being a father and a husband? What's your approach there?
Yeah, right. So it's not easy, and to say otherwise would be inauthentic. It's hard some days, and some days you're a better father and a great husband and not as strong employee. And, other days it that shifts. But I think for me, you said you got all these meetings. One of the things I do is try to avoid meetings at all costs. Naval talks a lot about this. And if there's not a clear agenda, and look, to be clear, there's going to be people watching this that say, oh, it must be nice to be able to avoid all these meetings. Well, it didn't start out like that. I tried to understand what is the most value that I provide. What is the ROI that the leaders care about, and how do I get that? And I don't get that by sitting in meetings. And so I did work that drove the ROI that mattered to my leaders. And as a result, I get to opt out of a lot of meetings, but it didn't start like that. And so, I think that's important. But yeah, it's tricky to balance all those things. And I think, one of the best things you can do, especially at your day job, is take a look at Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. And I just think, again, there's so many distractions and there's so much noise in the world. And if people are wasting a lot of time. They're letting the time it takes to do work expand to the 40 hours or 45 hours a day that they work. And I think if you sit down and you really optimize your time and you focus and you don't get lost with all the distractions, you're able to be efficient at work, feel good about what you accomplished at work, and then turn it off and go home. And, there's a lot of societal pressure to not do that, to answer emails at all hours of the day and stuff. And, I fall into that trap here and there sometimes. But I also know that, like, what good does that, to me, the ROI on raising a successful kid that is an awesome contributor to society is more important than the work I do in my day job. And I try to remember that.
Nice. Yeah. You reminded me of there's a book that I read, The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm. And he talks about how, like, men have been sort of just like the routinization of life has almost killed their life outside of work. So they go to work, same routine, they come home exhausted. They would just want to sit on the couch, watch a NBA game or drink a beer, and then that's it. They go to bed. They don't interact with their kids. They're not being, they're not building that relationship with their wife. They're not maintaining it. And I feel like the approach that I think I try to take, and I'm by no means perfect in this approach, is like, it's like when I get home and I'm tired, I always have to remind myself, like, my morale, everything that I do when I enter my household affects my family. Like, because you're the leader, and you should, at least you should strive to be the leader of and your wife can be a leader of the family as well. But you can, as a leader, as a person who considers themselves a leader, you can come in to your job and affect the morale. You can come in. So I always look at that, like, you don't realize that whatever you brought from work, right, that made you feel crappy that day because someone pissed you off, or you had, terrible call or whatever, and you bring that home and your kids think, like, oh, is it something that I did? Like, why is daddy mad? Maybe daddy's mad at me. And then you do that for 2-3 weeks, months. Now they think, like, worse things, right? So I always try to remind myself, and I have a struggle with this, honestly, because I do tend to I want to do at work what, I don't want to waste my time. So when I have hard days, it's like, questioning, like, well, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? And it's hard for me not to bring that home, but I've definitely practiced, like, calming myself, making sure I come home and just at least put a smile on my face and say hello to everyone, not just walk in and put my bag down and don't say anything and turn the TV on or something. So I don't know what your experience is with that, but how do you approach yeah, keeping not letting work sort of seep into your home life in a negative way.
Yeah. So the thing for me is, as a father now, I think one of the things that you realize really quickly is they definitely hear what you say, but more than that, they watch what you do. And so I really focus on my body language and my tonality and the things like that. And, I'm a huge proponent of reducing your commute as much as possible, but most people have a little bit of commute unless they work from home. And so I try to use that commute time to just kind of woosah, if you've had a bad day. And really and truly, I brought it home more often before I had the kid. I think they just really put it in perspective. And again, it goes back to the ROI on raising a successful contributor to society. My kid, that's more important to me than whatever happens at work. And that perspective happened when I became a father. I told somebody the other day, the best moment of every day for me is when I walk through the door. My kid's 2, and he's just at that age where his father's his hero, and he runs up and gives me the biggest hug. And it's absolutely the best moment of every day. And even if I had a bad day, it goes away immediately. And then, after he goes to bed, then yeah, my wife and I may have a glass of wine and discuss whatever it is that we're encountering that is bothering us, or, how to navigate this and talk each other through that. But it typically doesn't linger because, we use each other as sounding boards as appropriate. We don't, you don't want to come home and complain to your wife all the time either. That's not being a very good leader. But to me, the kid has really helped perspective more than anything, because he's more important. My wife's more important than whatever's happening at work. And that's part of having a side hustle. And that's part of doing the things I do on the side is I love my job. And that's not a lot of people that go to work every day, 9 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever that looks like, right? I do love my job. There's a lot of value I get and gratification I get out of that. But I still keep that side hustle, because if something happens with that job, I want to be optimized to be in a fine situation financially until I find something else, or I go out on my own, or whatever that looks like. But I think that's one of our commandments, is to be anti-fragile, and having multiple revenue streams enables you to be a little bit more anti-fragile and worry less about, these things that are prickly at the office.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on that you just mentioned is, I think I tweeted this a couple of months ago, but it relates to what you were saying, which is we need to look at our kids as the reason, not the excuse, right? Like, a lot of old people get older and they're like, I feel like they tell themselves like, well, I couldn't do this. Well, I had kids and, just didn't have time anymore. And it's like, you need to switch that perspective and be like, if you've got kids and, the more kids you have, the more reasons, not the more excuses, in my opinion. But I love that.
Yeah. I love that anecdote. That's phenomenal.
But so what about, as far as, keeping the relationship with your wife, fresh and exciting, like, which I think Hunter Drew, probably one of the best resources, and some of the stuff you tweet as well. How do you do that? Do you guys make sure that you're having one-on-one time, like date nights? What's your approach to keeping that flame going and making sure that, one of the most important relationships in the household is still a healthy one?
Yeah, so Hunter's one of the best resources for that, and I would encourage people to check out his stuff on that front. But my wife and I, when we first started dating, we had a date night every Wednesday night that broke up the week for us. And we would go and we would split a pitcher of beer and we would get to know each other. Until very recently, we've always had a date night on Wednesday night. Now it's gotten a little bit trickier, so we moved the date night to Friday night. But we have maintained a date night now in the 5+ years that we've been together. Well, before that, because before we got married. So we're probably looking at close to 7 years of date nights now. So that's been key. I think, it's about doing things together and having these shared values. So, the other thing we love is going on walks in the evening as a family. And so you're pushing the kid's playing with sticks, the kid's, running around doing whatever he's doing. We're able to have adult conversation. And I think the other important thing is the two of you can't smother each other either. I think a lot of people get in a habit where their spouse is their only form of person that they communicate with, once their lives get busy. And so she has a group of girls that she goes to wine night with, and it's probably once every other week or so, but that's really important for her to get out and talk to the other girls. And I love that because when she goes and does that, she comes home and is like, all those things that that annoy me about you, don't worry about those anymore. Because the other wives are complaining about bigger things, I guess, right? So I'm like,
you got some perspective. Yeah.
Go to wine night. Yeah, because I come back, I'm a better guy, evidently. So that's good. But yeah, you know, I think it's important to have some things in common, but then to also have things and you're passionate about. When she's watching a Hallmark movie, I'm not in the room. You know, I'm working on Ryan Stevens marketing. You know, I'm working out. I'm doing something for me. But then we also have things that we enjoy doing together. One of our guilty pleasures is we always watch the Real World Road Rules Challenge. They're on like the 70th of these things, and it's just like terrible TV, but we really enjoy it. So that's one thing that we always do together every week too. Awesome.
Yeah, I always, you know, in the last 2 years, I've done more of like, I didn't lift weights. I lifted weights maybe once before 30. Like I played basketball. I wasn't a weight lifter in the gym. No one ever brought me into that. But in the last 2 years I have, and it's been fantastic, like change in my own life. And I've noticed that even like my kids have observed that, my wife has observed that. I feel like fathers, you know, you get so beaten down by whatever the routine of life or whatever situation is at work, but then you don't realize how much influence you have in your own household. Like and I feel like it's one of the principles that I read from John Roseman, and I talked with Jake Viegel about this, but just the idea of like, you need to be a leader. Like you need love and leadership. I mean, probably one of the other ones is the discipline aspect, but I feel like men have forgotten that that's their role.
It's truly amazing. It really is. The other day I told my kid, I was like, hey, we're going to go do yoga. And he was just ecstatic about it. And it's so funny to like, you drop down and start doing push-ups. Your kid drops down and starts doing push-ups because they want to be like dad. And it's amazing. You see it a lot on all the moms that do the stuff. It's like the multi-level marketing thing, but about lifting weights and Shakeology and all that. But it's adorable because all their kids are like working out with them in their videos. And I'm like, that's awesome because you're setting a good example that like, this is what we do. Another one of our 10 commandments is fit fam, think healthy. And so we go on walks together. We'll put the kid in the stroller. I'll sprint to the end of the block with the kid in the stroller. And then my wife will sprint down and then she'll take a turn with the stroller. And so, yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it's critical for them to see it. And, you know, to your point, you have to be the leader of your family. And I told somebody the other day, that doesn't mean your wife is not also a leader. Great leaders delegate to the things that they're most strongly at. There are things that my wife is way better at than me. And so she leads those aspects of our household and I lead different aspects of our household.
So how did you come to these, like, to the way that you function as a father and as a husband? Was it an example from your own childhood, like your own father? I know you've talked about a little bit on Twitter, like your grandfather and your father. So is that where that came from, or is it more things that you realized in your own life?
Yeah. So I have tremendous role models. My father is one of the hardest working men I know. His father was in the Korean War. He's been married to my grandmother like 68, 69. I mean, 68, 69
Wow.
years, some insane number. My mom's father was a rodeo coach and a leader of men. He was married to my grandmother for, 50 plus years until she passed away. So I have tremendous role models. And so, I'm indebted and grateful to them. One thing that's a little different, for us is that it was a very patriarchal model where the women always stayed home. And so that's a little different in our household because my wife works and she gets a lot of gratification out of her career. And that was a conscious decision that we made when we had kids. Did she want to keep working? And we talked through that and made a very deliberate decision about how we wanted to move forward. But as a result of that, and I think this is something that's going to become increasingly more common in people, my age, older millennials and down, is two working households. And so, how do you navigate that? And that's a little different than our fathers because they worked and the house was in order and the meals were prepared because that's what the women did. So now how do we navigate that with our wife also working? And so that looks a little bit different. daddy might change a few more diapers, or maybe daddy spends more time playing with kiddo so that mom can do X, Y, and Z around the house. But I think, that's different from everybody and different for everybody. And I think, everybody has to figure out what works for them. But, for us, it's a matter of testing it, and we're learning it all the time. And there are things that I do well and things that my wife probably wished I did better. And so, we have open dialogue about that and navigate that, as it comes up, as it comes up and as appropriate.
Nice. And I just want to mention this because you brought up a point that another speaker talked about. So Elliot Hulse, I spoke to earlier in the conference, but he actually talks about how fathers pre-industrial revolution were actually in the home, right? Served as more of the kid was there watching them be a carpenter, be a farmer, be a blacksmith. And there was like an apprentice, more. And I think one of the struggles that we have today is exactly what you described. How do we still be in the household, but mother could be working, father could be working. And it's a difficult, question. Elliot's answer was, and you can go watch the video after this. I would recommend it. It was that somebody's got to come back to the household at some point, or you should try to have some type of career that has you in the household more, so that you just have more face time, because who's going to raise the kids? Some people have, luckily, family, your mother can watch, or an aunt or something. But some people don't have that. So it's very difficult. And I don't know what the perfect answer to that is. But I think it's important to think about deliberately as you're thinking about it, because we've got to be conscious of who raises our kids and what are the influences in their life, especially when they're super young and they're
and the world is changing really fast right now, right? And so there are some things that aren't necessarily aligned with our ideological view of the world. And when you let your kid go out into school or wherever else, I think it's especially prevalent in college, some indoctrination happening, in certain fields. And that's something we definitely want to avoid. And so the decisions we make, again, our kiddo's 2, so I don't know how indoctrinated he's being at 2 years old, but I think we'll continue to be really thoughtful about, the types of influences in his life and the things that he's learning. And when he comes home, he's going to have conversations with his parents about the validity of some of those things, I think, So I think that's really important. Looking back, my father did that with me, and I didn't necessarily realize it at the time, right? The things that he taught me were influential, even though I didn't realize I was learning them at the time, but they shaped my character and who I am now and some of the beliefs I have now. Not that those can't change based on, any number of experiences, but that your parents have a big influence on you. And I think that's critical.
Yeah. And I'll just mention Jake Weigel has teenagers. His talk, he goes into exactly what you're talking about. Like, his kids are in school, and they go from teens to younger, and he still manages to have a strong influence on them and do exactly what you're talking about. Well, I have one more question for you, and then we'll wrap up here. But I know you've tweeted about this before. How do you approach work-life balance? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a multitude of people now that are saying, oh, you shouldn't have work-life balance. They should bleed into each other. And I'm kind of the opposite approach of that. I don't know that I agree. I think it might look differently depending on, if you're a true entrepreneur. But the reality is that most people aren't yet. It may trend that way to the people watching this conference. But if you're not an entrepreneur, I really think it goes back to that: do the best job you can at work, and then come home and turn it off as much as possible and be as present as you can for your family. Because the things that you are doing in your household, I always tell people, look at people who are 88, 95 years old and their thoughts about things. None of them will ever tell you, I wish I would have worked harder at my day job. Not one. They also don't tell you, I wish I would have had less kids. So we think about things like that too. People at the end of their life, what are the things that matter to them? And it's spending time around family, spending time with people they love, being their authentic selves, saying the things that they think without fear of repercussion, and things like that. And so that can be hard sometimes, but I think we try to use that as a North Star and go back to what would those people say, you know, they've been through all this before, and this is kind of where their head's at. And so how could we, you know, emulate that in our own lives? And so, you know, I'm not the best at work-life balance. I don't know if I should necessarily, in fact, I was really bad at it until I had a kid. And again, I think he put things in perspective and made me realize what's actually really important. So I'm not the best person to probably give advice on that. I spent a lot of Sundays at the office prior to my kiddo. And part of that is that I like my job, but part of that too is probably an ego thing. You know, I'm adding this much value and I'm so important and I have to be working over the time. And, you know, I think ego is the enemy, and it's important to kill that ego and realize that, like, unless you are in a very tiny shop or you are the entrepreneur or you're one of like 5 employees, that ship is going to be just fine without you. You know, they may encounter a hiccup if you go somewhere, but they're going to fill that void. And that's not true of your family. You know, if something happens to me, you know, that's a much bigger hit to my wife or my kiddo than it would be to if, you know, I was one of 20,000 people that's now all of a sudden gone from work. And so I think that's an important way to look at it as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Ryan, I appreciate the time you took today. I thought this conversation was fascinating, and I think other men and fathers will benefit from it. Yeah. And so thank you. I don't know if you want to mention any place where people could find your work, or other than Twitter, and yeah, where else can people go and find more information on you?
Yeah. So on Twitter, I'm just at Ryan Stevens. You can find me there. Also recently launched a collaboration site with my wife called dialedinmen.com, which is really a repository of ideas that we would give to our kid if something happened to us. And that's kind of the way we think about that. And, you know, our kid's male, so other men may benefit from that side as well. And then if you're interested in more business marketing stuff, I'm also at ryanstevensmarketing.com, 10 years worth of articles there. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Ryan.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Bill. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks.